ঠিক হয়ে যায়।
Welcome to this edition of the Persecution Report, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the current developments in Bangladesh. I'm Professor Bidit today, and I will take you through today's discussion on influences of instability, misinformation, and disinformation instigating violence in Bangladesh. As we know, Bangladesh is currently facing a troubling rise in mob violence driven by the widespread dissemination of misinformation and disinformation on social media platforms. In particular, Facebook has transformed into a breeding ground for inciting unrest, frequently targeting progressive political and cultural activists, as well as vulnerable religious and ethnic minorities. Awaमी League activists and supporters, as well as individuals with liberal and progressive views, are the prime targets of a set of vicious influencers who have been sometimes having strong connection with extremist groups such as Jamaat Islami. Individuals are often labeled as atheists, blasphemers, or connected with and/or sympathizer to Awami League to justify brutal attacks on their lives and property. Throughout July and August 2024, a disturbing coalition of self-proclaimed social media influencers teamed up with various online channels and groups. They unleashed a wave of attacks and anarchy across Bangladesh. Their incendiary rhetoric ignited violent outbreaks, including devastating arson attacks and the wanton vandalism of public property. Police and security forces found themselves under siege, facing brutal and barbaric assaults leading to high casualties of police personnel, while leaders and activists of Awami League, as well as members of religious and ethnic minorities, were mercilessly targeted, assaulted, and often brutally slaughtered. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, marked by fear and unrest, as communities struggled to cope with the escalating violence under the pervasive and perpetual shadow of misinformation and disinformation. Mob violence in the offline world has been directly planned, triggered, and coordinated by online activism led by influencers living in Bangladesh and in some European countries and the United States. A notable instance of these is the demolition of Dhanmondi 32, the residence of the father of the nation and the lighthouse of the country's independence movement. To discuss this issue, we have a panel of experts today. Let me join in welcoming our panel members, Professor Subhajit Basu, Professor of Technology and Law, University of Leeds, United Kingdom. We have Barrister Tapushkanti Bol, former prosecutor of International Crimes Tribunal Bangladesh and Senior Associate of South Asian Democratic Forum. And we have Mr. Anwar Shadat Jihan, who is a columnist and aerospace engineer. First of all, I would like to request Mr. Jihan to take us through some of the slides as evidence of what we have been noticing in Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Dey, for inviting me today. And a special thanks to our incredible panelists for taking the time to join us, because today we are going to talk about a topic that is of prime interest to our younger crowds. And I'm pretty sure that our listeners will learn a great deal from both of you today. So the online violence or the offline violence abusing online mediums, we can see there are like three categories of crimes. We can categorize the violences in three levels: state level violence, and then violence at a societal level, and then violence targeting individuals. So let me go over some of the incidents that we have seen. I mean, not only in this 1 year, but in recent days, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, where the influencers living abroad have abused the online social media to create real life anarchy in Bangladesh. It was a Wednesday in February. The students of Bangladesh were getting ready to listen to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina address to them for the first time, since she was forced to move to a secure location in a neighboring India in the face of a death threat by a violent extremist mob. So most of the students were actually excited that she was going to address to them after so long. However, at the same time, a group of infamous self-proclaimed influencers based in France, Australia, England, and even the United States were getting ready. They were getting ready to run the darkest online campaign in the history of Bangladesh. They ran an online campaign, a call for bulldozer procession to Dhanmondi 32 residents. They have gathered their follower base, who are primarily the fundamentalist sections of the society, and they ordered them to destroy, demolish, and bulldoze to the ground the piece of history that even the Pakistani hyenas, the Pakistani military, did not dare to touch during the 1971 Liberation War. And as you can see here, this individual, he abused the social media, particularly Facebook, and he has been very specifically instructing his follower base to go to Dhanmondi 32 and to attack and destroy the piece of history. And as you can see here, he was even threatening war in case the military were to intervene. And as you can see here, it is written in Bengali. So since they communicate in Bengali, sometimes they evade the eyes of the social media police in this way. And from the threat of war, direct war against the military, you can understand the gravity of the crimes and the violence. And this is an example of a state level violence, because here it is a state entity that is being targeted. It does not only have a history, it does not have significance in our history, but also in present days. For example, the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she said, if she was ever facing any dilemma in taking any state decision, any important state decision, she would go to that house, sit by the stairs where her father was brutally killed, and she would ponder on thoughts how Bangabandhu would take a decision. So you can imagine how significant and how sensitive it is to us. And then there is some individuals based in England. And this particular individual, he uses his connections in the intelligence agencies of Bangladesh. And using those connections, he sometimes leak authentic classified information and sometimes doctored classified information. And by that, he puts the national security of the country at jeopardy, at risk. And another pattern that he uses is that he target individuals. He leak individuals' private information online. For example, here you are seeing a SSF officer. He is targeting this guy. He would leak his private information online and he would put his safety and life at risk. And this is the crime at an individual level, targeting individual that they are committing. And these are crimes that are obviously very concerning. However, there is something else that is even more concerning. And that crimes target the society, and that crimes happen at a societal level. For example, the communal violence. And this is not something recent or new. If we look back in 2021, there was an incident in Kumilla where a Quran was put on the feet of a Hindu deity, and it was allegedly done to create friction between two different religious sectors in the country. And what was found is that later that Iqbal, the guy who did that, is actually a Muslim. And this group of influencers sitting abroad using their hired bots, they have amplified this situation and then caused real life chaos in Bangladesh that resulted in multiple deaths of both communities. And this trend continues till this recent day, as we also have seen in Rangpur, the Rangpur communal attack after a teenage boy allegedly posted a blasphemous comment, derogatory comments about the prophet. And seeing that they instructed their violent follower base, the mobs, to go and attack the Hindu village and destroying, looting, vandalizing the Hindu properties in the process. This is this is the crime at a societal level. And here you can see that this guy, this gentleman, he's a mentally challenged individual, and he allegedly also posted something online. And these influencers that we all know based in France, he is instructing his base to go and kill this man. So just try to imagine the seriousness of this crime. And we have seen during July, the other gentleman based in Australia, his tactics, he has some deep grudge and hatred against India. So using social media, he would spread hatred and animosity towards India. He would try to create anti-Indian sentiment. So as you all can see, and as Mr. Yunus, the unconstitutional chief advisor, always talks about 3-0, right? He has some 3-0. So here they are actually following 3M. They are manufacturing outrage. They are monetizing the division. And by that division, they are creating real-life anarchy in society. And our listeners should use their intellect and their judgment to understand what is fake and what is real. And rightly, our episode's name, Misinformation and Disinformation. There is differences between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is information that is false, but that is spread by the people unknowingly. They don't intend to cause any harm. Whereas disinformation, it is created intentionally, a false information targeted towards creating violence. So, Mr. De, as you are seeing, this is an important issue, and we all should be really concerned about it. Back to you, Mr. De.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jihan. That's very thoughtful and insightful. And also, we can clearly see the concerning picture here. But as we know that social media is not confined within a geographic territory, and many would argue that the dissemination of misinformation or disinformation through social media is not just a country-specific issue. There are some global implications as well, and it is kind of seen in other countries too. And to my best understanding, a lot of research and scholarly works have been conducted on this area or within this space. So, and we have one of our panel members who is an exponent of research in this area, particularly from a legal point of view. So I would like to invite Professor Basu to come and join this discussion with a particular kind of area around how this is dealt in other countries and what sort of learning we have got from other countries. Over to you, Professor Basu.
Thank you so much, Professor Day, for inviting me. It's quite an interesting area which keeps me awake, to be honest, at night. Now, to start with, to look at different areas, how different countries are dealing with disinformation and misinformation, we have to remember there are international law in place at the moment which can deal with some of it. And the central reference point here is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In short, we call it ICCPR. Now, if you look at ICCPR, Article 19 protects right to freedom of speech and expression. But what is crucial here to remember, that it also allows states to restrict speech when it is necessary to protect national security, public order, or rights and reputation of others. If you look at Article 20, it goes still farther. It imposes a positive obligation on the state to prohibit anyone advocating a national, racial, religious hatred that can constitute incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. Some of the examples Mr. Jahan was sharing would come under this provision. Now, these two provisions, Article 19, which gives us right to freedom of speech and expression, and Article 20, which restricts it, they work together. And it clearly tells us that Article 19 is not an absolute right. And Article 20 tells us that when speech becomes a weapon, when it actively fuels hatred and violence, state must intervene. The question here is, would the current government intervene? Now, for the governments to apply those, there's one thing having rules, but there is another thing for the governments to apply those rules. So United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights developed a plan. It's called the Robot Action Plan of 2012, and it sets out a 6-part test. Now, it's a very clear-cut test which allows us to understand what sort of speech, how should we classify a particular speech. To do that, we start with the context of the speech, in which context the speech was spoken. When I say speech, I'm also mean post on in an online world. Okay, so it's not just spoken words, this also includes written words. So the context of the speech, for what purpose the speech was written, said. Then the speaker's intention, what did the speaker wanted to convey? Then the content and the form of the speech. The most important thing here is the reach of the communication. How far will it reach? How widely it will reach? You can understand posting on Facebook, the reach is unlimited. Anything from anywhere in the world can be accessed. And finally, most important, what is the likelihood of resulting harm getting caused because of that particular speech? The example Mr. Jahan shared, it is obvious those posts were intended to harm individuals or a group of individuals. So the threshold here is not merely about offensive words, but it is about words used as a tool to mobilize harm, to cause harm. Now, international, if you look at international criminal law, it reinforces this. The ICTR media case, this particular case happened after the Rwanda genocide. The media executives in Rwanda, they were prosecuted because they were using radio broadcast and print publication to incite and coordinate killings. So the example Mr. Jahan were showing would fall under that provision. If you look at the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Code, the principle continues. If you look at Article 25.3, it criminalizes direct and public incitement to genocide. Okay, I know the word genocide and prosecution on the genocide is very, very difficult to brought in. And for that purpose, we have to look at Article 7.1, which covers persecution as a crime against humanity, including persecution through denial of fundamental rights. So denial of fundamental rights is important here. Can we apply these laws in an online world? Absolutely. We have pointed out through our work that online hate campaigns can already fall within these provisions if they are systematic, if they are targeted, and if there is a chance to produce real world harms. The example Mr. Jahan showed have chances of producing real world harms, and we know that real world harms have been caused because of this. And there is a growing recognition that the use of digital platforms to terrorize people, to humiliate victims, to spread conspiracy theories, or to spread violent imagery, they are treated as an aggravating factor, not just for the purpose of identifying the crime, but also when it comes to sentencing. Now, if I move away from international law, because remember, the international laws are difficult and sometimes very, very difficult to implement, we actually depend on our national framework. And Professor Day, I'm sure you would appreciate that it is upon the countries themselves to apply these laws. So in United Kingdom, there are legislations which are already in place, which tries to deal with incitement and online harmful behavior. Some of the examples Mr. Jahan has shown would come under those provisions. And interestingly, one of the laws which we use in this country is actually quite an old law. It is Public Order Act of 1986. It criminalizes incitement to racial, religious hatred or hatred of any form. And then we have a much more newer legislations which have been created with internet in mind, Malicious Communications Act of 1988 and Communications Act of 2003. Now, these two legislations specifically deals with online threat, harassment, and sending of grossly offensive messages. One of the most important piece of legislation that happened in this country happened in last 1 year, and it is Online Safety Act 2023. Although it's Online Safety Act 2023, but it was passed in this country towards the end of last year, and this creates a statutory duty of care for platforms hosting user-generated content. It is one of the most unique pieces of legislations in the world, and it has been created specifically to protect vulnerable individuals and to stop the spread of misinformation and disinformation, which Professor Day and Mr. Jahan, you were talking about. It compels companies like Meta and X to identify and remove content that is illegal, and material that can incite violence is important. Inciting violence, the examples you have showed, inciting violence, okay, inciting hatred. So it will fall under this provision of law. What is new and unique about this law, that it now looks into systematic compliance, not just isolated takedowns. So when you started this discussion, you mentioned about not one individual, but a group of individuals based in different countries doing this. So because this content is accessible from anywhere in the world, which also means some of the content that has been made available on Meta, on Facebook, Facebook can also be asked to take it down within the jurisdictions of this country, because it is inciting violence. And our regulator, Ofcom, can impose substantial fines, even block access to services if these companies are non-compliant. European Union, and this is very important, a regional body, have a very similar law. It is Digital Services Act, which came into force in 2024. It takes a very similar but a bit broader approach. It requires big techs, large online platforms and search engines to conduct annual risk assessment for systematic harms for information that is directed towards European Union or companies working within European Union. Again, you have to remember, anything and every information can be accessed from anywhere in the world, which means it will come under the European Union law. And it clearly states that when you are doing these risk assessments, including disinformation, manipulation of electoral process, gender-based violence, religion-based violence, stereotyping individuals, these are harms. These things can cause harm. So failure to comply with them, European Union has a mechanism that it can fine this company 6% of their global turnover. The underlying philosophy here, if you look at our newly created Online Safety Act, and I'm just giving you two examples of European Union and United Kingdom. We can look at similar provisions also in Australia. It's due diligence by design. The idea is platforms must build safety and legality into their architecture, not bolt it after the harms occur. So what has surprised me is that Facebook is not doing about this content under the guise of freedom of speech and expression. Remember, freedom of speech and expression is not a license to incite harm.
Um, Absolutely, and that's where we can see that some of these influencers who identify themselves as journalists, they misappropriate and make use of these platforms to instigate violence. And also, another very crucial point, Professor Basu, that you have mentioned is about the profiteering of these social media platforms. There can be odd occasions that they take things down, or they identify, and sometimes they keep a complete blind eye to these content. Could you please elaborate on that? I mean, aren't they making profit out of this hatred?
Yes, Professor, that's a very interesting question, and that is the problem which we are facing. What we have seen that the the platforms uses algorithm which amplifies messages which are deliberately provocative. Now, social media systems are designed to prioritize emotionally charged content, anger, fear, humiliation, moral outrage, because these emotions generate clicks, comments, and shares. And if you look at studies done in MIT and in Oxford Internet Institute, it has come out from these two studies, very reputed universities and organizations, that shows false information or polarizing content. They spread 6 times faster on social media than factual or nuanced information. And platforms amplify such content, not because that they endorse that ideology. I don't think that they do. Um, but because outrage keeps users online longer. And in this attention economy, where you quickly move from one to another, within seconds, time is money. So more time an individual spend on a particular post or interact in a particular post, there is a chance of earning more money. This is the economic engine behind the problem, which I have objected to a number of times. You have controversies, which drives engagement. Then that engagement drives traffic. Traffic drives advertising, and advertising ultimately drives revenue. So, what we see here is more provocative or hostile the content, the more people will react to it. And that reaction is monetized. So, the architecture of social media itself rewards that provocation. So you have influencer who trade in outrage, conspiracy theories, hostilities. You know, these people are perfectly aligned with the platform's financial incentives. They produce content optimized for algorithmic virality. The content you will always see, this content Mr. Jahan was showing, there is no evidence given there. There is no logic there. They are short, and you will see the messages are short, emotive, a lot of emotion, repetitive messages. Okay, it creates that environment of us versus them dynamic. You contrast that. You contrast that with liberal progressive voices, which tend to rely on complexity. They rely on giving evidence. Why am I saying this? I have to justify why am I saying this, which makes this message longer, balanced, sometimes difficult to understand. Now, these are the qualities, these are the intellectually valuable qualities. But these qualities are not picked up by the algorithm. Algorithmically, these messages which are complex, evidence-based, balanced, are invisible. So it's just not a structural issue one side, it is also a psychological issue. We as human beings, we're generally, naturally drawn to controversial things, forbidden things, because we always thought that we need to know the danger first. And these influencers play on that emotion, okay? And social psychologists call this the negativity biasness.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that is the problem.
Thank you so much. That's very, very insightful and also very thought provoking. What we see that in terms of online and offline crimes, because okay, social media can take down certain posts or can ban certain individuals, but uh, can this also lead to offline or real life litigation? For instance, we know about Tommy Robinson, who is again an influencer in the UK and Western world, who is infamous for his violent and hatred against immigrants and very strong right wing narratives. Professor Basu, do you see that Tommy Robinson's example can be brought to prove that these vicious individuals can still be tried in real life?
Absolutely. Tommy Robinson, and there are a number of other examples which I will give you, are so you have to remember that online world and offline world, these are not disconnected world. And actually, nearly 20 years ago, I wrote an article about cyber stalking, and I kind of said in those days that your action in the online world can have a reaction in the offline world. So what Tommy Robinson and people like him do in the online world can have an impact. And I give you an example which just happened very recently. Lucy Connolly from Northampton. She was jailed for 31 months in October last year after calling for mass deportation. She said mass deportation now, and urging her followers on X to set fire to hotels housing asylum seekers. It is an example, clear example, where an individual has been prosecuted and sanctioned because what she wrote, incitement of violence in a physical world. So words having action. Last year, Taylor Kay and Jordan Parra, they both of them were sentenced to 38 months and if I can remember correctly, around 20 months in prison for stirring up racial hatred on social media. You can also see Romy Robinson is now facing contempt of court hearing for allegedly repeating false claims about refugees. Um, my understanding, based on a newspaper report published a few months ago, on an average, UK police make 30 arrests every day for offensive online messages. And Crown Prosecution Service, I'm just talking about the Crown Prosecution Service here in UK because going into laws of different countries will take a lot of time. But the Western democracies, the legal provisions are very, very similar. Crown Prosecution Service guidelines explains that inciting hatred is a criminal offense in England. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you do it online or offline. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Basu. And now I would like to go to Barrister Ball, who has first-hand experience of dealing with these sort of issues in the context of Bangladesh, and who is an observer of the developments, recent developments in Bangladesh. Barrister Ball, over to you. How would you reflect on what Professor Basu has said, and what your experience is with regard to the recent developments in Bangladesh?
The incidents that took place in August, you see that there is a design, specific design using social media to to get in touch with the young generation, to make them involved, not only online but offline. The main problem, like if you study the situation in Nepal as well, you will see that over there Facebook was not active, but they were doing it on Discord. Now, the problem with Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and the new generation is that they're actually consuming everything. Whatever information you were providing them, before judging whether the quality of the information, they jump on acting. They act on the basis of that. That is what is happening. So For example, if we talk about Facebook, back in 2021 in Bangladesh, during Durga Puja, a just a Quran Sharif was put in the on the leg of a Hanuman, and that post was forwarded on Facebook. Before the government even knew anything about it, through the Facebook, all the madrasa students and everyone were after the Hindu populace of that region, and soon it became a national crisis. The government could not pull the plug on Facebook because in Bangladesh they do not have the authority to shut down the Facebook all of a sudden. So after this crisis, what I did was that I filed a public interest litigation before the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, where obviously Bangladesh government and Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg, they were the defendants. I asked them that why Bangladesh government cannot control its cyberspace as it controls its physical space. The only problem is that the Bangladesh government at that time did not take it very seriously, you see, because the court asked the question to them that why you cannot do it, because India has done it. Australia, Mr. Bashu, Professor Bashu was giving the example of Australia, was giving it. Even the examples of what happened to Rwanda and what happened to Rohingya crisis were put before the court. So court was pretty convinced that Facebook, Twitter, and these kind of social media platforms need to be controlled. Otherwise, I mean, there is a situation for tariff. Bangladesh government controls how much advertisement is posted on Facebook and how much tariff they can consume. They have restricted that, but they have not restricted posting of misinformation and disinformation on the platform. So what happened, you see that if we go back to the July August situation, if you remember that one high court division, one court, one bench gave this judgment that okay, this quota system is the quota system is going to be, is going to be active because the government uh, stopped it in 2018, but the court said no, we will go ahead with the quota system. That actually infuriated everything. And after that, just after within 1 week, the state, after collecting the certified copy of that judgment and order, the government appealed against it. But within these 7 days, on the social media, all sorts of propaganda, misinformation and disinformation against the government, and aggravating the situation, saying that the Awami League government actually using the court to get this quota system back for the freedom fighters. Whereas the government understands the pulse of the young generation. The government wanted the students to just stay calm and to see what they will do with this decision, against this decision. And the government did exactly what they were supposed to do. They filed this appeal, but within this time all the misconceptions are there. Look into the situation of the first killing in Rangpur of Saidi. All the shots of, like, all on a sudden we were seeing that the police are only shooting him, but police were not using any live bullets. And now we know that he did not actually die of the police attack. There
Best of
was,
all, I would like to quickly intervene and add one
yes,
point here. So this misinformation about Abu Said and all that, it did not only affect the citizens of Bangladesh. It affected a certain state department of a certain country. You see, they already declared that there were two murder that occurred, but there was no murder. Nobody died when they already declared that two students were killed at Dhaka University, and it was a false information. So the false information not only affects the citizen, it affects also
Yeah.
official entity.
Said was not a student of Dhaka University, but I know what Mr. Jihan is saying, that one of the
so
foreign countries' State
it
Department
was,
actually put that news that someone from Dhaka University was killed, which
I
was
mean, not
completely
only
wrong.
that, after 5th of August, all the statues of our liberation war and the artworks of our liberation war was deliberately, you show us the slide, the slides are shown, right, that there are certain people abroad, they were putting those statues on their social media pages and were instigating people to attack and demolish those pages. Not only
And
that,
and that
religious.
is, if I may intervene,
Yeah,
Professor
please.
Ball, and that is akin to cultural genocide. 800 plus sculptures were vandalized or destroyed completely, including some of our very beloved, very dear ones, which represent the history heritage of the country. So, yes, sorry, Professor Ball, just wanted to compliment.
And
Yeah.
they would also like,
Just,
when if somebody
yeah.
was traveling abroad, they would provide the information of their flight, so that mob go and prevent them from getting out of
Flying
the country.
abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not only, I mean, I'll just correct you in one place that legally there is no word called cultural genocide. However, we are trying our best to get this word recognized. Just we are trying to get recognized ecocide, So legally, these are not crimes, but in sociology, these are crimes, and we are advocating for them. But back into the situation, what Mr. Anwar Sadat said, that social media was heavily used to target people, target religious and ethnic communities, and everywhere. These social media, if we pull the plug on social media, if we could have pulled the plug on social media on 5th of August, let's say we could have reduced the number of destruction and killing to less than 5 or 6, probably. Even they were targeting, like, for example, on social media, on WhatsApp or on Facebook, people are saying that, okay, all the police constables are at a certain area, so one area is vulnerable, there is no police, so all the mob were going there and attacking that area, you see. So, and even people are saying that what kind of armaments were used, that police were killed, right? On the very first time, for the very first time, 4 police were killed in Jatrabari. Now, these police officers do not work in the Jatrabari police station. That is the place where they live, they reside with their family. What happened is that they were going to their workplace. That's when the mob attacked them. Now, how the mob came to know about their whereabouts, about their residence? It is again through social media they were targeted. So this is totally, outrageous, the way social media is being used for destroying countries, and I strongly condemn, because not only Bangladesh, it is in Myanmar against Rohingyas, in Africa, in many countries that is being used, in Nepal we have seen recently, in Malaysia and other countries. So social media, this side of social media is vice, and we have to do something against this. The states cannot just say, Mr. Basu was saying, was pointing out to, you know to Rwanda uh, cases on media. They are called media cases, Nahimana cases, and things, and ICC statute. But there are problems to these laws. For example, ICC statute cannot try a corporate. Yes, it can try Mark Zuckerberg, probably, but it cannot just tomorrow say that, okay, we are drawing a case against Facebook and we will shut it down. They cannot do it. Even, any other international can do it, because everybody can control a state, but nobody can control these gigantic corporations, which has actually become more than a state. You know that Mark Zuckerberg, just few days ago, he declared that Facebook is a state, itself is a state, and laws of the practical or physical states does not apply on it. What an audacity! Can you say that when you are using actually our cyber territory? So when you are using our cyber territory, which is also our sovereign area, you cannot just say that, and you cannot just promote, criminals to use your area or your sphere to demoralize a country, to destroy a country, a economy, like Bangladesh and other South Asian countries.
Right. Thanks, Barrister Ball. And I also know that you are a campaigner for human rights, and particularly for religious minorities in Bangladesh. And in the last 1 year, We know more than 2,400 attacks were perpetrated against people from religious and ethnic minorities. And where do you see that the roles of these influencers, or we know one particular incidence of Rangpur, which Mr. Jihan showed, and also we know about Utsav Mandal, who was vilified and demonized as a blasphemous individual, and he was almost beaten to death.
That's another situation. Like when I was in Bangladesh, I myself did appeared for 6 7 cases regarding these kind of blasphemous activities. What happens that in Bangladesh, 39% of total populace uses Facebook. Now everybody doesn't have a mobile or a computer, but they go to the local cyber cafe, they open their Facebook, then they do not log out of it. So what happens that one of your friend, like in one of my cases, I have seen that one of your friend who could access your Facebook from the local cyber cafe, he posted something against a particular religion, and all on a sudden all of your village is destroyed, you are being beaten by the mob, and half death police arrests you for doing what? You remember that when Awami League was there, back in 2023 in Bhola, the same similar thing happened. So all of the madrasas, like 100 madrasa students, which would be around 100,000, they attacked the local police station, saying that the perpetrator who posted this blasphemous statement is in the police. But what actually happened, that boy was very clever. He did not surrender to that particular police station. He went to another police station, to the SP office, superintendent of police, who is the head of that district. He went to that office and said, my account is hacked, and this particular statement is put on my Facebook account, and please arrest me. I am giving you all my Facebook password and everything. Please see whether I have posted it or not. And luckily, during that same, like for 3 days, that situation went on in Bhola. And then finally, the police came up and said, okay, some person from Kumilla, from another district, hacked his account. And that hacker was a Muslim guy. And just to put this Hindu boy in trouble and to create this hoax, they posted it over there. The same thing has probably happened with Utsav Mondal, who is just a 14 years of kid. And this is happening everywhere still now.
This is a general pattern we noticed, but we also see that in last 1 year this pattern escalated. There are more incidents because the government is completely keeping a blind eye to this and often pandering to these extremists, and the government is in effect supported by the extremist groups. So in order to pacify or appease these various extremist elements within the society, the government is choosing not to intervene. So that's a sad and grim situation currently.
Another place where people are in most vulnerable situation because of this social media is the hill tracts of Bangladesh.
Yes.
If you want to create a problem between Bengalis and hill tract people, then you just post something on social media from a fictitious account, and there will be a war.
Yeah, and also two major incidents happened in the last 12 months in Khagrachuri district. On both occasions, there were civilian casualties. And we noticed that the very influencers we're talking about, they demonize these indigenous communities in our hill tracts areas. They are being vilified as anti-state. They are being demonized as anti-Bengali. And this also creates kind of animosity between communities and the rest of the country, particularly people from the plainland. They often are not told about
The particular
And instead of taking responsibility for these atrocities at the hills, the government is blaming India or some other
Yes.
entities to
Yes.
promote this in Bangladesh.
not
This
only
is
for
an
that, right now Bangladesh government is blaming for everything to India. I mean, blaming India for everything. So what I'm trying to say is that from Professor Basu's conversation and my discussion, you can find a pattern that if you want to vilify a person, if you want to commit genocide against a group of people, you just target them, You strip off their dignity, you demonize them, you lower them to the rank of an animal, so that it becomes easier for people to kill them or to destroy their properties or their places of worship. That is exactly what happened. You know that the term they use for Hindus in Bangladesh, they call them Malaun, right? That's the term they use. This is a most demonizing term, or term to lower the human standard of Hindu people in Bangladesh.
Thanks, Barrister Ball, for your comments. So we are on the last 10 minutes of this show. I'll now come to Professor Basu one last time to reflect on the discussion very briefly in 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Professor Day. Can I start by saying that free speech ends where deliberate incitement to harm begin? When someone, if you look at the influencers you have talked about, when influencers exploit digital platform to mobilize hostility or violence, whether it is done in Europe, Australia, or United States. Remember, United States have one of the most liberal free speech laws, but it is not absolute. When you are using the digital platform to mobilize hostility, to cause harm, to demonize people, you are not exercising democratic right. You are abusing it. And that is my problem. Freedom of speech and expression protects ideas, not violence. Even if you look at the law in existence, freedom of speech expression, it defends right to criticism, debate. I wrote about it. It even allows people to be offensive. There is no right under human rights law where an individual cannot be offended, but it does not protect people to spread hatred. It doesn't do that. And if you look at laws around the world, if you look at the cases around the world, it is the same thing. One of the things that has surprised me from the discussion of Barrister Ball is a government inaction to shut down internet. We have seen examples. I do not always support censorship of internet or shutting down of internet um, anywhere in the world, but we know a lot of times shutting down of internet is necessary, and it works. So government needs to be much more proactive in protecting the people it is serving to protect. It has been put in place to protect. It is the responsibility of the government to protect the people. That is all.
Thank you, Professor Basu.
I,
Now,
I,
yes,
I
yes,
will,
Barrister Ball.
taking the question, I will just tell you that in Europe, particularly in Germany, they're thinking about flooring a law whereby any kid under 16 or 17 years of below 16 or 17 years, they will not be allowed to use social platforms. So they're thinking about introducing it. So please, I just wanted to add with Mr. Basu.
Thanks, Barrister Ball. Mr. Jihan, we particularly, we have got a massive Bangladeshi diaspora around the world, right? And many of them are acquainted with the likes of Andrew Tate and Tommy Robinson, and we see that we are victimized by them as like diaspora being immigrants. We are the victims of the right wing, extreme right wing, far right activists. Now, this is a message. I would like you to draw this message and to convey this message to the diaspora that what they feel about Tommy Robinson or Andrew Tate, the same sort of crimes are being conducted, perpetrated. They are by these influencers, the repeat offenders. Would you like to elaborate on that, please?
So, like I said, three aims, right? Uh, manufacture outrage by manipulating the emotion of people, and then monetize on those division. So this is a trend that is prevalent not only in Bangladesh but across the globe. So these far right people that you talked about, Andrew Tate and Tommy Robinson, one guy uses his toxic masculinity and spread hatred towards the female and all that, by preaching masculinity. And the other guy, on the other hand, he uses his religious rhetoric, anti-Muslim and Islamophobic rhetoric, to target the refugees. And similarly, the group of individuals that we have been talking about, these people are doing the same thing. They are also the far right extremists, because their follower base are the extremists in Bangladesh. So the diaspora, the world community must pay heed, because as a sovereign country has sovereignty in the physical space, the sovereign country should have sovereignty in the digital space as well. Bangladesh, or any country for that matter, should be able to maintain and control their digital space and protect the digital space against any foreign enemies or any domestic enemies. So this is an important topic,
Yeah.
and we
Thanks.
all should care about that.
Yeah.
The government and the world community must pay heed and figure out some formalities to how we can ensure sovereignty of various countries, and
Thanks.
protect the
Thanks,
digital
Mr. Jihan.
border.
Yeah, I'm conscious of it, but of course, we'll talk about, I'll come to Barrister Ball about the role of the international community very briefly, but also for the diaspora Bangladeshis, it's about time to tell them that you cannot have your cake and eat it. You cannot support these despicable influencers while at the same time you will be criticizing the far right activists in the West. You cannot have both. Over to you, Barrister Ball, your concluding remark about what international community could do. Just please elaborate on Mr. Jihan's point.
For the Bangladeshi social media, entrepreneurs, I would say entrepreneurs, because they are earning a lot of money from this hate speech. So these people, the only loophole they use of social media is that they produce their contents in Bangla. And in spite of the fact that artificial intelligence has reached into that level that it understands Bangla, but it has failed to understand the standard or the veracity of the hate speech, the misinformation and disinformation created by these people. Because when one person just says something about Dhanmondi 32 or 32, the house of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, it to the social media AI or to those persons who are there to censor these things, to them it may sound like a normal protest, but at the end of the day, it is destroying a whole generation, a historical monument, an emotional monument, a particular monument that is so dear to us. So what I'm saying that first of all, I will agree completely with Mr. Anwar Sadat and I mean Mr. Basu's. I will just echo his words that the moment you start to create hate speech, you leave the territory of freedom of expression. That moment, so this statement must be, I mean, honored by every single state. They should identify who are these people who are creating this hate speech in the name of freedom of expression, and they should take action against these individuals. If they fail to take action against these individuals, then they should regulate these social media platforms. As Mr. Anwar Sadat said, that this is my territory, so I should guard them. And if even if we fail that, then ICC and this kind of platforms we should use to get after people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and people like that
Thanks.
who
Yeah.
are giving or destroying the civilization in the name of freedom of
Thanks,
expression.
Barrister Ball. I'm conscious of time. Dear viewers, we have explored various aspects of the online dissemination of disinformation and misinformation, including legal considerations, its prevalence in other countries, and the diverse responses of these challenges. Additionally, we have gained a clearer perspective on how disinformation and misinformation are fueling political violence, targeted attacks, and the vilification of individuals and communities in Bangladesh. It is imperative that we put an end to this harmful behavior. These malicious influencers should not be permitted to propagate toxicity any longer. Some disguise themselves as journalists, as we mentioned and found during our discussion, while others openly flaunt their capacity to incite hatred and violence. social media platforms are profiting from this animosity, jeopardizing communal and social harmony in the process. We call on Meta and other companies, major social media companies, to take decisive action against these individuals. Furthermore, the Western nations where these so-called influencers reside must respond with equal resolve. If action can be taken against figures like Tommy Robinson, there should be no hesitation that similar sort of measures can be taken against these individuals. We want to say unequivocally that Bangladeshi lives matter too. Dear viewers, stay well, stay safe, and take the very best care of yourself. Until next time, I am Bidit Day, signing off. Thank you.